PAR is setting up so that I did not turn on the record button. Thank you. So let me go over just how we'll lay out our agenda. And again, we typically try to follow this same flow because you are a group of individuals that serve really as key communicators for us in our district. So we intend to inform you, and tonight we'll provide you with some background information about the Teacher Laptop Initiative and how technology resources are growing in our district. And then we'd like to take you into our schools to visit some of our classrooms to see what's happening and how the activities, the teaching and learning activities, continue to evolve as these resources continue to change for us and we increase the number of technology devices that we have available to our students and now to our teachers. So we're hoping that we can answer questions you may have as we provide you with this background information and provide you with what you need as you engage in conversation with others in our community. And then we'll ask for some feedback. So I've referred to you in this agenda as advisors because we often look to you to provide us some feedback, to answer a question or two that we're wondering about, because we just always appreciate what you have to offer and share based upon your children's experiences in school or your own experiences out in the real world. As we continue to always try and prepare our students to be ready for that next level. Okay, so some background information. We're going to talk tonight about the Teacher Laptop Initiative, and I'd like to begin by providing you with some background on how we actually planned for the purchase to provide a laptop to each of our teachers district-wide, and that was about 450 or so. And I'll also give you some information about how we decided on the particular device that was purchased for our teachers. But our teachers had been working with desktop computers that were getting pretty old and had been on a lease. So we can actually lease some of our hardware and our equipment as opposed to purchasing it. And it allows us to have a more manageable payback arrangement with the company so that we can essentially do more. So we had a lot of devices that were coming off of lease, which provided us an opportunity to replace those devices with new ones. So these funds, in other words, had been allocated for technology, and our board was very supportive of moving in this direction and purchasing an updated and new device for our staff. And the device selection was an interesting process. We tried to involve key individuals from each building, beginning with the technology coordinators, and then actually inviting them to take a variety of devices. We zeroed in on about 4 different devices, 4 different laptops that they could take into their buildings and share with staff. And staff had the opportunity to actually touch them and play with them and just become familiar with them at some level so that they could make a recommendation. So we gathered data that way, and we learned what the preferences were on the part of our staff and eventually decided on a device, and it happens to be a yoga device. So as I move into this story, this year we began the school year distributing a new laptop to all of our teachers, and it was actually a yoga device. This was a very exciting time for our staff. They were thrilled to have a new device. They were thrilled to have a laptop. They take these laptops home so that they can do work from home. And eventually, because they're wireless, they naturally connect to a wireless setup network. They can move around the classrooms, and that is ultimately our goal. So they were very excited too, because these yoga devices that we decided upon not only are a traditional laptop, they can also be converted to a tablet, and they have a touch screen. So really a versatile device for them as we attempted to find something that would meet the needs of all of our staff. So all professional staff received a new device at the beginning of the school year with some professional development on the considerations that need to be made with a new device and how to use it. So we introduced them to the features of this device. So while we've introduced a new device for all of our teachers, we also continually and simultaneously add devices for our students. We are continually trying to provide access to our students in all buildings to modern resources. And technology devices are the devices of choice, really, for our students. Whether those devices are iPads or laptops or Chromebooks, our students gravitate towards these devices and are becoming more and more proficient at using them as part of the teaching and learning activities in classrooms. So in phase 1 this year, all of our teachers have a new yoga. We continue to monitor our infrastructure because we've added a lot of devices. We continue to add devices for our students. That's the off-stage aspect of our technology that we need to think about and make sure it continues to be strong enough and robust enough to support the devices that we add as our district grows in this regard. And there have certainly been some hiccups as far as the infrastructure goes, and we are working diligently with our partner company, as I mentioned, Bartech, to resolve those issues and make sure that our teachers can use these devices, our students can use the devices that they have, whether they are their own or ones from our school here in the school district, seamlessly. Eventually, if I point out phase 2, eventually we want all of the devices to connect wirelessly and not need to be hardwired or plugged in. And we want teachers to be able to move around the classroom just as we would like that for students. So I have often shared with you a picture of a traditional classroom where the desks are in rows and students are seated in desks in rows with a piece of paper and a pencil. And our classrooms look very different today as we move away from that approach to teaching and learning and more towards student-centered classrooms where students are using technology devices or modern resources to support their learning. So we'll share some of that information with you. But before we take you inside our schools, we wanted to provide you with the background information leading up to teacher laptops and some of the additional devices that we're adding. The other thing I want to mention as part of our conversation tonight is that we felt it really important that our teachers have an updated device, if you will. And again, some of the desktops that we were using were getting pretty old, probably between 7 and 10 years in some cases. And our students are coming to us with a really strong skill set in the area of technology devices and using technology resources. So this also is our way of supporting our teachers so that they are better equipped and they continue to learn about technology resources and how they can meet our students where they are and support instruction using these devices. So that's the background. Anybody have any questions on that? Because I did a lot of the talking and, you know, I try to avoid doing all of the talking, but I'm not sure if anybody has anything that they would like to add or question that you would like to pose.
Hi, Dr. Russell.
Yes, hi.
Hi, this is Greg in Kalingo. I don't know, I guess you could hear me. What is, just real quick, what is a yoga?
Yeah,
great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And Greg, thanks for joining tonight. I actually have one that I can put on camera to show you. But a yoga is a particular type of device. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Parr is going to shift us so I can put you on camera. And I'll show you. It is a very versatile laptop.
It's a Lenovo. It's a Lenovo ThinkPad.
Yeah, so that's the brand. It's a Lenovo ThinkPad, and so it can serve as a laptop, but I can also flip it, and it can also serve as a tablet with a touch screen for teachers. I can use it as in a tent formation, so some teachers prefer to do that while they're working at their desk and access the touch screen. So the yoga is the name of this particular device, and it's the one we ended up selecting based upon the feedback we got from staff.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, sure. Sure.
Which is a great question, because when we first started setting up training, we neglected to explain what yoga was. So our subject heading was training for yogas, and people actually thought that maybe we were starting a yoga class within the district. So it was a good question that you brought up.
Yeah, important to clarify that. Any other questions based upon that background information? Okay, so we'll move on. So I mentioned very briefly at the beginning of this conversation, I often describe the meetings as having a flow that includes informing this group, engaging this group in some sort of activity, and then seeking your advice or your feedback. And tonight we've actually changed that a little bit. So I've attempted to provide you with some background information on how things are changing with respect to technology resources in our schools. Now I'm hoping that I set you up to feel comfortable serving as key communicators in our district. So when others have questions, that you're able to answer those questions. So I want to take you into our classrooms and share with you some of the things that are happening, some of the things that you would see and will see next week if you plan to visit our schools for American Education Week. And maybe you're hearing about some things from your own children or individuals you may be connected to that attend Perkiomen Valley schools. In addition to focusing on using more modern resources and incorporating technology devices, as part of that, I wanted to point out that we think about developing our students as 21st century learners. And I'll talk more about what I mean by that, because that's a phrase that we hear quite a bit in this day and age. I'll also point out that our board, as part of the comprehensive plan that they have developed and approved, that is a really overarching plan that helps guide the district and provides direction, has identified 6 qualities that we aim to establish in our students by the time they graduate. So these qualities, they're also connected to 21st century learners. They're really important, no matter what resources we're using as we move students through our schools. And I've listed those qualities of a Perkiomen Valley School District graduate. These are the targets. We want them to be effective communicators, to be strong problem solvers and complex thinkers. We want them to work well with others, to be responsible citizens, to be familiar with technology, to be literate with all of the different devices, and actually to be able to adapt to the new devices that are constantly coming into play, and to be self-directed learners so that they can assume responsibility for their own learning, understand what works for them as a learner, and be able to actually structure their learning in a way that supports success. So that's self-directed learner. So some of these qualities you will see embedded really in the activities that we talk about tonight as examples of how we're using technology. And then I also want to just talk to you about and get your feedback, your thoughts on developing our students as digital citizens and recognizing how we teach them about cyber civility. How do we assist them in knowing right from wrong, in being critical consumers and producers of information on the internet? So that also is embedded in some of the work that we do with our students. And you may have some experiences through your own children. You may have some suggestions, and we're really interested in hearing those tonight too, because again, that needs to be a part of what happens as our students use these devices. So let's go into some of our classrooms. I've shared with you on this particular slide, and I'll get into more detail about some of those points on the last slide. But on this particular slide, you see 2 pictures. And these are, one's a middle school group and one is an elementary school group. And on the left, you see students using computers. And you'll see more and more of that in our schools at all levels. Students using devices. Sometimes they're using those devices in small groups. Lots of times they're working in small groups with and without a device, and you see that depicted on the right. That's an example of how we are encouraging collaboration, and there is, again, less of that independent work. Students working together is a major focus and becoming a more common approach in our classrooms for our students. So something else I'll point out is that as we go deeper into our classrooms and talk a little bit more about the actual activities, in addition to thinking about 21st century learners and what that actually means and those qualities that we want to help establish in our students, I want to point out to you some of the other overarching themes. As far as teaching goes, as educators in this district, we think about being purposeful with our instruction. And when I'm using a technology device, it needs to be appropriate and supportive of the learning, not just a novelty. So we really try and be careful. So I'm going to connect a lot of our conversation tonight to using technology resources. So we're focusing as teachers, as educators, on being purposeful. We're focusing on engaging our students. And we use formative assessment. That's a goal on our part as the administrators and teachers in this school district to make sure we know where our kids are as learners and how we most effectively engage them. We want to know what they already know, what they don't know, and how we challenge them, how we add rigor to their experiences. We want to engage them. On the learner side, as far as students go, we're focused on making sure they have the knowledge and develop the skills necessary to be successful. And again, part of what we focus on is developing them as 21st century learners, or with those skills that are connected to 21st century students, and then those PVSD qualities. But engaging our students is a major focus, meeting them where they are and challenging them so that we engage them in what's happening in school. Just some key terms as we talk about 21st century skills. These are really the buzzwords that we connect to what that means. We want our kids to be effective communicators, to be good collaborators, to be critical thinkers, and to be creative. And we're trying to instill these things in all of our coursework, in all of our classroom activities. And then, of course, we talked about those 6 qualities of a Perkiomen Valley School District graduate as defined, as identified and defined really by our Board of School Directors and in our comprehensive plan. And these have been in place for a long time. We've adjusted them slightly, but really these have been a focus on the part of our district for a long time. So here are some pictures. I also have some video clips that we'll move to, but here are some pictures of students using devices at different levels. You'll see a student working individually with a device and with a paper and pencil. You'll see 2 students reading on an iPad, 2 students working on computers, and then students that are participating in a webinar where they are interacting with another group of students or a particular presenter. And these are occurring more and more. So there's interactivity facilitated that way. So I'm curious about your thoughts on, at this point, digital citizenship and cyber civility, if you have them, or if you have some positive experiences or questions about how we focus on that or incorporate it into what's happening, maybe based upon some experiences. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts that they would like to share at this point.
And remember, you can either unmute your microphone or feel free to type in the chat.
Hi, Dr. Russell. This is Greg Incolingo again. And I don't want to jump ahead, but I'm just wondering how that would be controlled, the cyber civility. I know that a lot of times online, the anonymity lends itself to certain bullying or aggressiveness. I'm just wondering what could be done in the school to control that. Is there tracking, or would there be a cyber policeman that if somebody saw or observed some of those different bullying texts, that one of the other students could be called out or or have that behavior corrected, similar to like a playground. If there was a fight in a playground, that the students would be corrected, would that also be done online?
Yeah, that's a good question. And these sorts of choices on the part of our students sometimes they can be very challenging or more difficult to deal with. It's a whole different set of choices versus some of the more traditional ones, like the one on the playground you referenced. So to begin, we certainly have some filtering in place. So our students are limited in terms of the access that they have. So in other words, for example, I should say, they don't have access to social media while in school. They are not permitted to access that. That's part of our filtering system. We also have, aside from technology, we have anti-bullying efforts in place, and more specific ones at the middle level. They are standardized programs, if you will. They're research-based programs. It's called Alveus. And at the elementary school, there are other conversations that occur on the part of a classroom teacher that attempt to instill respect in students and avoid that bullying. But it happens. And we're dealing with situations where, particularly as students get a little bit older, they sometimes make poor choices and they will share an inappropriate photograph, or they will text an inappropriate message that presents as bullying or disrespectful behavior. And we have ways of tracing who's responsible for that at times. We can figure out where something came from and identify a student who is responsible for that act or that choice, and then deal with it. We have articulated in our handbook ways to discourage that. We have consequences identified, and we are working to discourage that behavior or modify it via those consequences, but also via those programs and the conversations that we have with our students, in addition to not allowing them access to certain sites while they're here at school.
So just to piggyback on that, I think we really try to strike the balance between being proactive and being reactive. So as Dr. Russell kind of discussed, we do have several programs from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade that are age appropriate for kids, that talk about the way to use these tools and how they can participate in conversations that go outside of the classroom. So we're really trying to focus on that proactive piece.
So that was sort of a long-winded answer.
No, thank you. And it's one of those, I'm just thinking through what you're saying, and it's a challenging concept, right? Because as much as proactive as the school can be, it's going to happen, and there, like you're saying, there are ways to deal with it on the back end, but it's just a challenging situation.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think we are trying to focus a little bit more on how we make sure some of the little things that can go a long way are embedded in what happens for students in classroom settings, so that nothing's really taken for granted, so that even our teachers are aware and they're thinking about that. If they're not teachers of technology, but maybe they're teaching math or they're teaching literacy, delivering instruction in those areas, that they're also thinking about some of those things that come along with using technology resources that are different from when we just use books, for example, or paper and pencil. So we continue to work on that and inform our teachers and think about continually how we can integrate and embed those ethical practices into what our students are experiencing. So that's an area where I'm really inviting some feedback from you, anyone that's participating tonight, on how that might look better, or where you've seen some really positive examples, or maybe where we can focus a little bit more with some specifics. So I see some typed questions.
So Judy posed the question, how does the proactive piece work? And expressed that she's concerned with young children having access to internet sites where they could post something without fully understanding the ramifications of their actions. So Judy, that is a great point. I can speak a little to the proactive piece in that it does begin in kindergarten, but again, it's age appropriate. And the messages are usually received by students through a collaborative effort of our counselor and our technology teachers. And then, of course, within the classrooms as well. Our classroom teachers are very good at reminding kids about proper use and things like that. As Dr. Russell commented, we generally don't allow our students on sites where they could post something that is inappropriate. We do, however, post sites to educational or post comments to educational sites. We allow our kids to collaborate in that way, and we do monitor. You know, we make sure we stay on top of what they're doing and how they're communicating. In the middle schools, we continue our efforts, both as something we call boot camps, where our kids are exposed to different digital citizenship type topics. And then that type of instruction does continue throughout 12th grade and is embedded within their classrooms. I'm also going to take a minute to check our microphone settings, just because I know, Judy, you mentioned that you were having a hard time. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't mute you. Yeah, I think you have complete control whether you want to unmute yourself, so you should be fine. So I'm looking here at the settings, and yep. So Greg, I know you were able to unmute yourself, so I'm pretty sure that our settings are okay.
She's thinking it could be her.
Could be the microphone. Okay.
All right. Well, you keep sending your notes via chat, and we'll respond to the chat as well, Judy. I appreciate you sharing. So let's move on. Let's take you into some of our classrooms. This is just another picture of a student using a device. Our focus as a district. And on this particular screen, I thought I would share with you, there are 4 examples of video clips from our classrooms. And I want to give you a little bit of background. In this first one, this teacher is actually formatively assessing her students. So she is moving her students through something called Kahoot, which is an online quizzing system. And students can use a personal cell phone or device to actually respond to questions that she poses on the screen. And immediately she can learn as the teacher where students are in their learning and what she needs to address instructionally. So it's an example of how we gauge where our students are. So I'll just show you a few short. Okay, so what the teacher did, let me just show you one more seconds. So a formative assessment is a type of assessment that informs teachers of where students are in their learning based upon where they need to be, versus, say, a summative assessment, which would be an assessment of learning, like a unit test. So formative assessment is something that we continually encourage because we really want our teachers to know where our students are as learners so that they can respond appropriately. They can plan the instruction appropriately so that we focus on challenging our students, engaging them in learning based upon where they are. So this teacher, and that was sort of a slow beginning to get to where we wanted to go, is formatively assessing her students. She's asking some questions that they can respond to electronically. And then what you see on the screen right now are the results. And the results tell her that approximately half of the students that responded answered with C, while the other half with D. So there's some confusion about this particular topic in the question. So what this data tells her right now at this point is she needs to review that. So a formative assessment is really intended to inform the teacher of what he or she needs to do to effectively support students. So this is an example of how students are using technology, of how a teacher is using technology in our classrooms. Let's totally shift gears and let's go into a high school classroom where students are actually participating in a virtual lab. This is a science classroom at the high school. And while many of our students continue to participate in the more traditional hands-on labs, we also have students that are beginning to participate in virtual labs. So I'll show you a clip of these students working together as lab partners, as a small lab group, and participating in the experience virtually.
And then he's just like tiny.
So in this case, this is a really different way that our students are learning some of the science, different from the traditional approaches that we've taken. We still see the traditional approaches, but these are growing. This is a graphic arts class, and in this particular class, students are working on a project. It happens to be a project to develop a flyer on Cuba. So we'll listen to the teacher speak a little bit in this one. This is Mr. Comp. He's also from the high school.
Everyone just start talking.
Yeah. What are you doing, Mr. Comp?
We're in our intuitive graphic design class. We're learning about Cuba and also learning about the pen tool and Illustrator, and we're designing travel posters for Cuba. What's interesting is we do a lot of research now that we can handle it. That allows us to go down to Cuba, United States citizens. We thought it was a great opportunity to research in Cuba. Students that had sketchbooks out, they sketched out their ideas, find out about the culture of Cuba. What are some things about Cuba that we didn't know that we want to incorporate in the poster, while also using the tools in Illustrator to design a poster that will get people to travel to Cuba.
So what do you do with the posters once they're produced?
Well, we're going to hang them out in the hallway, and then we can all take a look at them. So we'll do a little critique at the end to see which ones were really effective and to get people to want to travel to Cuba.
So another way that we are using technology is to support our students becoming very creative producers of some of the things that they are expected as part of their learning. So this graphic arts class is an example of how students are using technology in that way. This is another example of a webinar where students, again, were interacting with an author. These are 9th grade English students. I'm going to take you into a middle school class. One more example of some clips that we can view. And I just want to set the stage for this one. So this is a middle school technology education class. Again, more technology and a focus on some of those skills that are connected to technology, the critical thinking, the collaborative work, being technology literate. These students are actually programming robots. But a couple of things I want to point out. This is the same teacher and 3 different aspects of the lesson. And in the beginning of the lesson, she is using a formative assessment methodology with clickers. It's just another way to learn. I'm sorry?
Okay.
I couldn't quite hear you.
Maybe you could type in the chat with it. We're not getting a clear.
I'm sorry, I can't hear. Gosh, I'm so sorry. Can you type in the chat? I'm sorry. Hello?
It might be.
Maybe is that better? I can hear you, but you're muffled. I'm sorry. So that's something we have to do.
Okay, let's see if that's any better for now.
Oh, it's an echo of my own voice. Okay.
I think it's based on someone's microphone. So we just turned all microphones off, and I think it might be a little bit better now.
Is that better? Can somebody provide some feedback?
Lynn said thumbs up.
Okay. All right. Great. Sorry about that. I'm sure that wasn't pleasant.
Technology is wonderful when it works the way we want it to.
And valuable feedback. So I just wanted to, if I could, share with you these videos and talk a little bit about the flow. In this particular lesson, teachers formatively assessing students where they are. Not sure. And then they're introduced to robotics, and then they're actually working independently. So let's take a look at this and then help me. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on with the volume, the sound.
This is what challenge we're going to work on today. Remember I said we're going to get the robot to trace this square here. So I want you thinking ahead. What two who's steering what do you need to use to get your robot to turn first? Think about what shape the square is. What do you need him to do? Do you need him to move forward and backwards, forward turn, move in a square repeat, move backwards turn. Hold the correct answer up, please.
So these are Plickers cards that this teacher is using. So in this case, students don't each need a device to respond. In the last example of a teacher who was formatively assessing her students, all the students needed a device to respond. In this particular case, with this formative assessment methodology called Plickers, they hold up a card that represents the letter of the correct answer. And the teacher captures a snapshot of that with her device to see where kids are. That's another example, another way that our teachers are trying to learn and gauge where our students are. This teacher is instructing our students on robotics, on how to program a robot. So let's go to the next slide. In this clip, she's explaining what needs to happen on the part of the robot.
A little bit is going to go off. It's not going to trace the square. So you want to program it like this. See how I'm on port view and it says D motor is 0 degrees. What do I need to do to see how long this is? Yep, we're going to push it forward. You want to do it, okay? Yes. And you want to go to your wheels in the center of the red line. Go forward more. Down, keep going. Right side up. I can see.
Okay, stop.
Okay. Now in curve says 672 degrees. So she would program it to move forward degrees, 672 degrees, and then do what? What kind of turn? Turning left or turning right? Right. Oh, yes, yes, you go turn right. Now, is it, so if we're going to have it move forward, you're backwards. We're going to have it move forward and turn right. How many times is it going to do that? 4. So instead of writing that out, forward, turn right, blah, blah, blah. What? We're going to loop it. So you're doing it once and you're going to loop it so many times. Now, each robot is slightly a little bit different. So you're going to have to check out your port view.
Okay, so now in this particular clip, you'll see the students working independently. So again, different way of using technology, different from our students using laptops or Chromebooks or iPads to actually complete an assignment in reading, math, or science. This is another way that we are exposing our students to technology resources and really critical thinking, collaborative work. So here's an example of the students as they now work to program their robot and get it to follow that path that was designated. Oops, sorry. Okay, so both students successful down the first path, but need to work on continuing around the loop. Different way for our students to be using technology, and we're trying to increase the opportunities like this for all students. And our middle schools have tried to do that very intentionally this year as part of some of the new aspects to their schedule. Okay, any questions on any of the video clips as we wind down and move into the last segment of our discussion tonight? Any feedback, any questions, any comments? Some different examples of technology and how teachers are leading students using technology resources. Everybody's muted. So,
I think you can unmute.
Yes,
Hi.
sure.
Hi, it's Greg in Kalingo again. Just real quick, thinking back, I'm jumping around a little bit, but just thinking back to the other video in which the kids were responding using their own devices and they were interacting with the teacher who was up front with the smartboard and through the web application. Is there anything, are they able to get onto other sites using their devices, or are they limited just to what is available there in the classroom? So let me explain that, because sometimes I know the technology stuff is great and there's so many different possibilities with it, but there are also a lot of temptations and distractions. And I know that's something trying to manage in our own house, where I'm always looking at my over the shoulder a bit to check on them just to see, okay, they still on the right website doing their assignment work, as opposed to Minecraft or something else. But is there something that some controls that are put into place to make sure kids don't use those distractions when they bring their own device into school?
Not necessarily. Now, when they bring their own device into school and they sign into our BYOD network, they are filtered as a student, so they're protected. But as far as being able to go to another website or be off task, that's something that we can't quote unquote control other than with classroom management. And we really do find though that for the most part, kids are on task. Sometimes maybe it's a novelty, maybe the first or second time they bring their devices in, but they get over that novelty pretty quickly. And in the classroom, especially like what we were talking about before with the teachers being mobile and the mobility aspect, the teachers are walking around the room constantly. And if anything, we find that the kids want us to look at their screen because they kind of want to show off what they're doing. And we really don't have a huge issue with kids being off task.
Okay.
It's a good question, honestly, and it's something that we continually think about, because you're right, there are temptations, and our students have many of them have a lot of prior experiences with technology devices. I sort of share with parents at kindergarten orientation in August as these young students come to us and sit down at a desktop with a monitor, they swipe the screen because they're just so used to using a touch device. So they come to us with a lot of experiences. We have to be careful as we assist them in navigating so that they stay safe.
I know
Now,
with,
yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I know with my older son, I created an account for him on Outlook, and I use a lot of the Microsoft products. And in Microsoft, I'm able to designate him as my child. And because of that, I get every week I get a report from Microsoft saying, here are the websites, here's his activity, and here are the websites that he visited, and here's the amount of time he was on each one. Is there anything like that could be implemented to say, here's where the kids were going? Or not everything, maybe just this, there's like an alert that's sent to say, hey, this one child was off task, they went to Minecraft.com or something for 15 minutes.
Yeah, actually, a couple of things. We do have, as I mentioned, a filtering software, but that also, as you said, will create for us a report. And we can drill down to see where a particular account was, meaning a student account, where they were on the internet. So when we mentioned BYOD and that they can get onto our Wi-Fi network, the kids have to sign in using their unique username and password. So we can then identify which of their devices were on our network and exactly where they went. In addition, another way that we have, there are some management tools that teachers can use in the classroom with all of the devices that that we can kind of watch in real time where they're going. We're not necessarily implementing those in all the classrooms just yet, but those opportunities are there.
So,
Okay.
so another question that was posed, and I was actually wondering if this question would come up. What do we do with students who don't have a device and other students who do have a device have one to use for an activity? And we think about that a lot. We think about equity of access for our students. So one of our goals is certainly we've opened up BYOD where students can bring their own device to school. And as Mrs. Parr just mentioned, they can log onto our network and they can access typically the places our teachers are asking them to go to get information or complete some work. Some students don't have a device, and we want to be sure that we have devices available so that nobody feels left out of an activity because they don't have a device. So we continue to work on that and consider equity across all of our buildings at the elementary level, at the middle level, and in the high school, and do the best that we can to make sure everybody has access. Even if they don't have their own device, they have something that they can use belonging to Perkiomen Valley. So we're cognizant of that, and we continue to work on that. That's a really important question. Any other thoughts or questions on some of the variety of technology? So let's wind down. You are advisors to us as a school district serving on this 21st Century Teaching and Learning Committee. We really appreciate your input and your feedback on topics. Increasing technology devices, providing all of our teachers with devices. This was a big step for us to take this year. We're hoping to continue to actually capitalize on what our students know and what we can do with these devices to support teaching and learning. Do you feel well informed of the activities happening in our classrooms? Do we need to expand the ways that we communicate information about what's happening with your children? What else do we need to think about as we prepare our students to be college or career ready? So that's a question I'll pose to you and actually give you an opportunity to respond to very briefly in the next minute or so. But I'm also interested in what other questions you might have about your child's school experience using technology. Okay. Interesting question. So a question about accepting smartphone donations and devices. So are you referring to Mr. Fall's refurbished devices?
Well, excuse me. Well, I have a number of smartphone devices in my house that, you know, you upgrade your phones at home. And sometimes, you know, you just tend to hang on to them. So they're still usable. They might be a generation or maybe two revs behind maybe what's available today, but they still could provide functionality. So if the user, the community, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, just thinking out loud. So if the district would kind of open up maybe a trial to accept some of those, it would be interesting to see how many you'd get, the condition, and then if they could be reused.
Yeah, I love the suggestion. So you know what? I'd like to talk to our business administrator about that. We have to be careful accepting donations, but I love the idea. And you're right. It's often something that happens for people, especially in this day and age. They move to a new device and the old one is still functional. So let me follow up with you on that. That's great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, and I'd be happy to donate about 3 or 4 of them for a trial.
Wow. Okay.
Great, okay.
Terrific. Terrific. Excellent. So let me ask you, as we prepare to wind down, let me ask you if you would. We have one more question. So before I give you the Padlet board, it's actually just a question that I'll ask you to answer. Can I click on this to get to it? Okay. This is a website, before I answer Mrs. Lofton's question, this is a website that'll take you to a Padlet board. Maybe you're familiar with a Padlet board, but it poses a question to you and you can type a response and those responses will appear all over the board. So I'll leave this up for a minute while I address Mrs. Lofton's question, and maybe you can access this site. You'll see the question and then I'll go to it and share some of the responses that you're sharing. Okay, so Judy's asking, I've heard a lot of concerns about the online foreign language. There is a question about feedback and that they're not gaining the knowledge they will need to proceed to the next level without the human interaction to support conversational skills. What is the district doing to better support these students? Yeah, that's a really important question. And as we wind down the first marking period, we have discovered some things about the online German that some 8th graders are participating in at the middle level is lacking in communication. So this is a concern. And right now we're reaching out to the company and we're thinking about reporting maybe the 2nd and the 4th marking periods as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4. But you're right, it's an issue because we need to think about how prepared these students are for the next level and what we need to do to make sure that if they have gaps, we fill them in and we set them up for success at the next level. So we're learning some of this. Our students at the middle level, as 8th graders, if they chose to participate in German, are participating online. So instead of participating with a classroom teacher at Middle School East and Middle School West, they are participating in an online language module, and that's what Judy's referring to. And we've discovered with the German that the communication isn't exactly what we had expected and that we want. So we're working with the company on that and also with next year's teacher for those students at the high school to make sure she is aware of this experience for our students and where we're discovering the gaps are so that we fill them in. This was a pilot program this year to have some of our students at the middle level participate in a new language like Chinese or Latin. That doesn't count for a grade, but it's a part of their Viking block. It's just a part of a way to enrich their school experience. While other select 8th grade students who had participated in German in the past are actually participating in online German. So that's raised questions. And those are things that we are working to address, but very important. So how about if I switch us to the Padlet board and see if anybody was able to get there. So the question that I've posed to the group is, what else do we need to think about as we prepare our students to be college and or career ready, to really, to go out into the world based upon the way they are experiencing school? And again, I'm sort of focusing on that technology piece.
So for anybody that's not used Padlet before, if you were able to follow the link and pull up this board, you can double click on an empty space on the interactive board, and then you can go ahead and type in your comment. As I see there's a comment developing here now.
So this is another example of a resource our teachers use. It's free, it's online, and students can respond. And a teacher can be aware of what her students or his students are thinking, and it's anonymous, which is sometimes a more comfortable way to participate for some of our students.
I see the computer programming and building apps is on there, and this might be a good time to mention that we are holding our evening hour of code in December again, and that's an opportunity. It's something that every school will be participating in throughout that week. Hour of code is actually a week of code of activities, but we're also having an hour of code on one evening. I believe it's Thursday, December 10th. Is that right? Thursday, December 10th. And we encourage parents and kids to come out and join us. And it's really hosted by our high school kids. There's a high school computer club, and they'll host it, and they'll do activities all centered around computer programming, both plugged and what we call unplugged, which help our kids to start thinking about programming and different digital designs.
Wonderful comments. Thank you for sharing. And I see that there are a few comments on the Blue Jeans platform too. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Parr to go back to that from her device, and I'll continue to leave this one up. Hour of Code takes place in the high school cafeteria, and it's open to all age students and their parents if they choose to come. If you've attended in the past, I hope that you've found it stimulating. Lots of different sorts of activities connected to coding that occur and are supported by, as Mrs. Parr mentioned, our high school technology club. They put this on. We always appreciate and want to recognize our board of school directors. We are able to provide extra devices that night that support students who come without a device. They don't have to bring a device. We have one that we can loan them to use. And we have some teachers that come out as well and are very helpful as students either are introduced to coding, programming for the first time, or actually expand their skills.
So Judy, I saw that you have a question here about what we can do beyond the hour of code. I'm curious if you meant in the home or if you mean at school. I can address the school if it, okay, so it wasn't school. We do a lot of different types of computer programming from, at all the levels. We start with kindergarten, as a matter of fact. We have something called bee-bots, which are these really adorable, cute little bees that run on like little wheels, and the students need to program the bees, and they start to learn different types of computer programming language. And there are activities including, as I mentioned before, plugged and unplugged activities where the students will begin to get that basic and those building blocks for coding. And we continually build upon their knowledge year after year, all the way through to 12th grade, where we have some really amazing courses at the high school focused on computer programming. And I know one of the things we're going to begin to look at even further is app development, which I believe somebody mentioned on the Padlet board.
Mm-hmm. Yes, great.
If you haven't seen Hour of Code, it is a really neat website. There are different activities, and some are centered around topics, or I should say, different themes that the kids really love. For example, there's a huge Frozen component where kids can design different programs that will manipulate different Frozen characters, and they are also coming out this year with Hour of Code, a huge Star Wars component. Our kids are really excited about that as well.
Dr. Russell, this is, and I'm sorry, I don't know what the other person's saying there.
Yeah, Mrs. Parr. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mrs. Parr. Are there any opportunities for kids to be involved in the development or maintenance of the Perk Valley, or maybe they already are, I just don't know about it, but the Perk Valley website, something where they could, in addition to some of the other things that can be built through the web that they would do in the classroom, have an opportunity to really build something that would be truly in production, something that's used, and they would have the experience of updating and maintaining that site, something they could really take the skills that they learn at home or in the classroom and apply.
That's a great question. One of the things that we've moved toward, one of the tools, because as everybody knows, there's like a million tools to do web development and things, but we wanted to find something that was appropriate for our kids. And Google provides us with that opportunity through Google Sites. So some of our teachers are looking to help students provide websites using Google Sites, and they are things that would be available to the public. Now, what's nice about that is being that it's on Google, we have the opportunity to either keep it in district only, share it with certain people, or share it within the, out for the whole public. And that's more a tool that we would use K to 6. Whereas at the high school, some of our computer classes do develop more sophisticated websites, and they do publish them. I'm assuming that the connections would be posted on the PVSD website, like the links to their pages would be on the PVSD website, but they may be private at this point.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, great. So I appreciate your responses on the Padlet board, and it gives you a sense of, again, another tool. And as Mrs. Parr mentioned, there are lots of different tools. Let me go back, and I'll sort of wind down our presentation tonight with an opportunity to share additional comments if you have them. So just to recap, I was hoping that tonight we could better inform you about where we are, the state of technology, if you will, where we are in the district with respect to technology, and how it is more and more becoming a part of the teaching and learning activities for our students. I'm also hoping that you feel well informed and comfortable communicating with others if they pose questions about what's happening in schools, or that you feel comfortable reaching out to me as a follow-up to this conversation. Again, this committee has been instrumental in making sure individuals are informed, and that if there are questions, they are raised and can be addressed. And finally, you've provided us some feedback, which is always helpful and welcome. And in addition, I'll extend that and request that if you're comfortable and you have thoughts on this virtual format, that you share them with me in the form of an email. And my email is brussell, RUSSELL, @pvsd.org, or to Mrs. Parr, she's T. Parr. I should have put that up on the screen and I didn't, but you can find us on the website as well. But I'm really interested in your thoughts on this format for conducting this conversation as opposed to meeting in person. We don't have a meeting in December. We do have one scheduled in January, and we'll wait and see as to whether or not we want to change the format from meeting at the high school library to more of a virtual. The effort is really to accommodate people and their busy schedules and provide them an opportunity to have a voice and learn some of what's happening in the district in the area of teaching and learning. So I'm hoping that if you have thoughts on this 100% fully virtual format, you'll share them. That'll be helpful moving forward. And then if there's no other comments or questions, I'll let you go and we'll sign off. And thank you for signing on and participating with us. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much. It was a very, very good meeting.
Good, great. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Dr. Russell.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Judy says thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Glad you could join.
Jess Lester says thank you. And Jess, I'm guessing you probably want some names of those kids that are going to help do the website. They would probably love it.
Dr. Russell, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am. Hi, Mrs. Hallis.
Okay, finally. I wasn't able to, for some reason, my microphone wasn't working before, but I shut down and then I logged on again and now it's working.
Okay, so were you the one that was speaking and sounding a bit muffled on our end? Oh,
No,
okay.
no, I think that was feedback because it was every time you spoke, that's when we were hearing it.
Okay, and yes, and I did get some feedback that my voice was echoing.
Yeah,
So
that's what it sounded like. No.
There's only one slide, which is nice. Setting on that slide.
Early on in the presentation, I was trying to participate and you couldn't hear me. And then I would try to type a comment, and when I would hit return, it would delete itself. So I don't know why that happened. I don't know whether my comment was too long, because then when I typed a short comment, you were able to see it. So that's just another thing that we want to look into.
yeah, I would agree with the system. Yeah, I'm glad we have that feedback. Okay,
But the audio is excellent. Now
okay.
it is.
And otherwise the picture was okay. Is that
Perfect.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
sometimes the video was a little hard to see, but we could see. I think that was. I don't know why that was, but I mean, like the whole slide presentation, and when we saw you, that it was perfect.
Okay, great, excellent, great to know. Good. And so we'll see what sort of feedback we get from some of the others, and then make a determination about the format moving forward. So very helpful. All right, well, have a great evening, and we will talk again soon. Thank you. Okay.